Greetings everyone. Today I want to talk to you about the Winchester 1894 chambered in 30-30 Winchester. So I realize it's been a while since I've made a video. I just want to give you guys a sort of an update on what's been going on. Last year we got hit by a Category 4 Hurricane Idalia, and it devastated our property. I mean, we fortunately, by the grace of God, our house didn't get messed up or anything like that, and nobody got hurt in our family. A guy from our church did die because of damage from Hurricane Idalia, but we were safe, and our property, our house and vehicles and all that were good. So we can't complain too much. We were without power for a little over a week, I think, if I remember right. But we lost a lot of trees on our property, and who cares? They're trees. But I would say in our goat pen, our goat pasture alone, we probably had 50 or 60 trees that were knocked over. Had a little bit of damage to some barns and things like that. We lost the trampoline, but all that doesn't matter. But I want to talk about the trees. So we probably lost, like I said, about 50 or 60 trees in our goat pasture, which isn't that big a deal. They're all oak trees, and they were all mature oak trees. And that, one, we like to hunt squirrels out there, and that's, fun. So those trees are gone. But also, our goats eat those acorns. Our goats get really fat when the acorns fall, which is a good thing because it helps them get through the winter when there's not a lot of grass and things like that. But anyway, we lost all these trees, and I've been cutting these trees up now for a year. I don't have any heavy equipment like an excavator or anything like that. So what I've been doing, I've just been basically cutting the limbs off the logs, leaving the logs there, and burning the limbs and things like that, and trying to save my chainsaw as much as possible. Anyway, a few weeks ago, we got hit again by Hurricane Debbie. All right. Hurricane Debbie was not a Category 4 like Hurricane Idalia. Hurricane Debbie was a Category 1. So the winds were definitely not as powerful. And in fact, most people around here were pretty happy that Hurricane Debbie didn't do a lot of damage comparable to last year. However, when Idalia came through last year, as I said, she knocked over a lot of trees. But there's a lot of trees she didn't knock over, but she kind of almost knocked over. They were leaning pretty heavily. About half their roots were out of the ground. So when Debbie came through a few weeks ago, she finished those off. And so I've been dealing with a lot of hurricane damage that was a combination of Idalia and Debbie. But I've been working on that. Also, my son, he plays football, and I'm one of the coaches on the team. And so I've been very busy with that because pretty much every day we either have football practice or we have a football game. So that's been keeping me pretty tied up. And so I haven't really been able to make a lot of videos. All right, but like I said, today I want to talk about the Winchester 1894 chambered in 30-30. But I also want to talk about family history because, again, this is a history channel. And family history is important because everybody out there, regardless of your training, you can be a historian. My grandmother was a historian of our family's history. And I have a PhD in history. I study colonial American history. I study Revolutionary American history. I am passionate about history, and I teach history for a living. But my grandmother, she didn't do any of those things. She wasn't, college educated. She didn't teach history or anything like that for a living, but my grandmother was a historian. She kept track of our family history, and we know exactly when our family arrived here back in the 1700s because of the work done by my grandmother. So family history is a very important thing that everybody can get involved in. And today we have more advantages than ever because you have, the internet, and we have these, these companies like Ancestry.com and things like that that can help you figure out your family history. But today I want to talk about this particular rifle because this rifle is an important part of American history, but it's an important part of my family history. And I'll explain all that in just a minute. Okay, so this is the Winchester Model 1894. A lot of times people will just call it the Winchester 94 or the Winchester Model 94. This is a lever action rifle. If you watched my last video about the American long rifle, and if you haven't, please go watch it. Put a lot of work into that video. But if you watch that video, we talked a lot about lever action rifles, and this is a lever action rifle. And this rifle was designed and first manufactured in the 1800s. In fact, 1894 was the year it came out, which is why it's called the Winchester Model 1894. This rifle was designed by a man named John Moses Browning. If you don't know who John Moses Browning is, he's probably the most prolific gun maker in American history. He designed tons of guns that are still in use today, guns that are still used by hunters like this one, but others as well. But he also designed guns for the military, and in fact, some of his military designs are still around today. Anyway, this one is chambered in 30-30 Winchester. That's also a significant piece of history because 30-30 Winchester was the first modern smokeless powdered cartridge. All right, now most of the guns y'all have seen me shoot on this channel are black powder, right? We've shot a lot of muskets and American long rifles and things like that, and they all use black powder. This was the first, the 30-30 Winchester was the first bullet to use smokeless powder in a modern centerfire cartridge. In fact, the original name for the cartridge was the Winchester centerfire cartridge, and today most people just call it 30-30 Winchester. But smokeless powder, if you're not familiar with smokeless powder, for one, it doesn't make a lot of smoke like black powder does, hence the name. But it burns at a lot higher pressure, so you don't need as much powder to get the pressure you need, and it's much more effective. It has much better ballistics than black powder. In fact, if you put smokeless powder in a muzzle loading firearm, the gun will explode and you'll probably kill yourself. So never put smokeless powder in a black powder firearm. All right, but this rifle right here, the Winchester Model 1894, chambered in 30-30 Winchester. Pretty important gun. The 30-30 cartridge came out in 1895, so 1 year after the gun came out. When I was growing up, you used to hear people say things like, the Winchester 94 30-30 has killed more deer than all other rifles combined. I heard that all the time growing up. To be honest, if that's true, this is definitely a significant piece of history, but it's probably not true. I don't know how people would gather that data and quantify it. But I think it's safe to say the Winchester 30-30 has killed a lot of deer. Now, this rifle right here is actually very important in my family history. So we're going back to family history now. This rifle was built in 1953. So the gun itself, the original, the very first one of these came out in 1894. This exact one I'm holding in my hands came out in 1953. All right. That year is the year my grandfather graduated high school. Now, let me tell you why that's significant. All right. My grandfather grew up in extreme poverty. My grandfather and his family, so his parents, his two brothers and two sisters, they grew up on a river near here, and they almost completely fed themselves off the land. They weren't farmers. They lived by hunting and fishing. And my grandfather was born during the Great Depression, so you can imagine how the Great Depression affected most Americans. For a family as poor as his, it would be hard to say, you know, how did the Great Depression affect you? Because they were so dirt poor, they probably didn't realize there was a depression. But my grandfather and his family, they lived off of hunting and fishing. And so they ate fish every single day that they caught in the river. And they would hunt animals like squirrels, rabbits, ducks. They had two guns. They had an old 12 gauge side by side, and they had a bolt action 22 rifle. That was the only guns that they had. Now, you notice I mentioned they hunted small game, rabbits, squirrels, ducks, things like that. Back in those days, back in the 1930s in Georgia, in South Georgia where we live, there were not a lot of, there weren't deer. Deer was an important commodity, the deer skin trade, dating back to the colonial period. The deer skin trade, followed by market hunting in the 1800s, almost completely wiped deer out in the Southeast. And it wasn't really until the 1960s and 1970s that there was a viable deer population in South Georgia to be able to hunt. Now today there's plenty of deer. I can legally kill 12 deer in the state of Georgia right now this season, 2 bucks and 10 does. But there was a long time where that wasn't possible. And anyway, my granddad, when he was a little boy, there was a man that they knew that had a 30-30 Winchester. He had a rifle just like this. Now, realistically, he probably didn't need it because there were no deer to hunt. That's not my decision to make. It's no one's decision to make about what guns you should have or what guns you should own except yours. And maybe the man just wanted the Winchester 94. I don't know. Maybe he was using that for home defense. I have no idea. I have no problem with the man owning the rifle. I'm just letting you know that there were no deer to hunt back then. But to my grandfather, that was a symbol of status. Like that man who had that Winchester 94, he had made it. He had made, in my grandfather's eyes, this man had made it in life because he owned that rifle. So like I said, my grandfather graduated high school in 1953. He went to work on the railroad, the Southern Railroad. And like I mentioned, this rifle was built by Winchester in the year 1953. And my granddad purchased this rifle when he made enough money working on the railroad. So this was the symbol to my family that my grandfather had made it. He had pulled himself up by his bootstraps, pulled himself out of poverty, and had made it in America. This was the symbol that he had done that. My grandfather killed his first deer with this rifle. Now, he obviously was a grown man when he did that. He took a lot of deer with this rifle. Now, eventually, he moved on to hunting with a 30-06 and things like that. But he always had this rifle, and he had told me that story about, just the idea that a man could own a 30-30, blew his mind, and that was how he knew he had made it. My grandfather died last October, and in Georgia, deer season starts in October. My grandfather died when I say deer season, I mean rifle season, okay? So my grandfather died about a week before the opening day of rifle season. And so I've got a ton of rifles. I've got, you've seen some of them. I mean, I've got ARs that shoot 308, and I've got ARs that shoot 6.5 Grendel, and I've got ARs that shoot 5.56, and I've got bolt action rifles, 7mm Remington Magnums, 30-06s, 270 Winchester. I mean, I've got every gun in the world I need to kill anything that I need to kill. But October of 2023, my grandfather died just shortly before deer season opened, and I said, hey, I'm going to hunt with this rifle. And I said, I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's a doe. I don't care if it's a spike. It might be the biggest deer ever. I don't care. I'm going to kill a deer with this rifle. And so I took it out. I went hunting, and on opening day, I killed a buck. And it was a pretty nice buck. It's one of the biggest bucks I've ever killed body-wise. His antlers were kind of funky. I'll see if I have a picture of him in here. He had 10 points. The way we score deer in the South, we go by, how many points of his antlers could you hang a ring on. So he had 10 points, but he was definitely a non-typical. He had 2 main beams on one side, and he was just a weird deer, but he was big. His body was huge. And I was so proud of that deer because I shot him with this rifle. This rifle right here is probably the most important rifle I own. I probably won't ever hunt with it again. But I'm going to shoot it today because I figure you guys would want to see me shoot it. So stay tuned and we'll get some lead down this thing. All right, guys, we're going to shoot it. I got a target down there about 100 yards. Now I want to make something clear, and this is probably going to make some people mad, but a rifle like this, I don't sight in. At least not the way I sight in most of my rifles. When I have a bolt action rifle or even a rifle with iron sights that I can make micro adjustments on, I will sight those rifles in as precisely as possible. With a rifle like this, or for example, my American long rifle, my muzzle loading rifle, I'm not worried about precision the same way I am with a scoped rifle or say an AR-15 that has iron sights, because these sights are dovetailed, and to adjust them, I basically have to hit them with a hammer. And because I am not an expert in micro adjusting sights with a hammer, I am not as worried about precision. So what I have down there, I have an 8-inch target, and I can barely even see that thing with these iron sights anyway. If I had a precise dot, a 1-inch dot, my front sight is going to cover that thing up anyway. So I'm going to shoot at that 8-inch target, and if I hit that target, then I'm satisfied, because I know when I'm deer hunting with this rifle, I'm going to be hunting at distances much less than that anyway. I killed that deer that I told you guys about maybe at 40 yards. So if I can hit it, I'll be satisfied. And like I said, I'm not going to hunt with this rifle again anyway. But this was sort of what I was doing last year to just make sure I was going to be on target if I hit the deer. With my kids, I'll do something similar even with a scoped rifle. I will set a milk jug down there full of water, or let them shoot a steel plate or something that's within the size of the vitals of a deer. Because I think sometimes if they're shooting at a 1-inch dot and they're 2 inches off, I think their confidence might get shook that they can't hit a deer. But honestly, if they're 2 inches off a 1-inch dot, that deer is dead. And so with something like this that has dovetailed sights, that's really all I'm trying to do is stay within those vitals. I know some of y'all are probably like losing your minds right now with me saying that, but that's the way I do it. And I've never had a problem with it. Now, when I shoot a scope rifle, I try to get that thing as close to where I'm aiming as possible. But with this, it's minute of deer accuracy is what I'm looking for. All right, so let me see if I can hit that target down there. All right, let's see. Yeah, and y'all don't know if you can hear it, but we drilled it. So that's a dead deer. That's a dead deer at 100 yards. Another dead deer. Last one. That's 3 dead deer in a row, guys. 3 dead deer in a row. 100 yards. I have no idea how close those bullets are. That steel plate is 8 inches. It's 8 inches. So if I've got one on one edge of the plate, one on another, and one on another, you know, is it accurate? No. But is the deer dead? Yep, all 3 of them. So that's just a little tip. What I really wanted to talk to you guys about was my grandfather. If he had killed all those deer with a Springfield 1903, this video would be about a Springfield 1903. But that's all I wanted to talk about, guys. Family history, it's important, all right? Your family's the most important thing that you have. And so keeping that history, passing that knowledge down, one day one of my children hopefully will have this rifle, and they'll be able to tell the story that I just told you guys to their kids and their friends and all that. So this rifle's ready to go if I need it to be. I'm not going to use it, but it's ready if I need it to be. So thank you guys for watching.